So, what should the process and mindset be for creating a pro sounding recording in your home studio? That's what I'm going to break down here in this episode. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Ultimate Producer Podcast. This is something I've been wanting to do for a while. Just give people a roadmap to getting amazing sounding recordings in their home studio, mixes, whatever your goal may be. But from that home studio perspective, not from the perspective of that you're this incredible seasoned pro with thousands of dollars of gear, but how do you get an amazing sounding recording? Because it's totally possible, absolutely achievable in your home studio with the gear you have right now, most likely. So that's what I want to break down in this podcast as a whole. Just continue to give information on how to do that. I've been in the home studio for close to a decade, and I've got proof on my channel of all the pro sounding recordings, mix breakdowns that I have. You can go listen to them there, just showing that you can get amazing sounding recordings, amazing sounding mixes with the gear that we have, with the plugins that we have, and the tools that we have. So that's the goal of my channel. That's the goal of this podcast. What I want to break down in this episode is what is the mindset that you need to have in the home studio to achieve a pro sounding recording. What are the steps you need to go through to get there? Let's say you're looking to track your song, and it may be your first song, it may not be your first song, but let's say you're looking to record a song, get a final product, get something that sounds great, and you're just a little confused about the process. You're a little confused about where to start. That's what I want to tackle in this episode here. Before that, you should like and subscribe to the channel. I also have a free guide called the Home Studio Toolbox that has a bunch of free plugins and resources that you can use right now and download and start using in your sessions. Drum software, MIDI, all sorts of things that just really help you build out an amazing sounding song. So you should check out that guide there. Anyways, I'm going to start getting into the process now. So if you think about creating a song, right? What's at the heart of the song? It's not just about all the production elements and not just about the song quality. Sure, those things are important, but what really is at the center of the song is the emotion you're trying to convey. What are you trying to get the listener to feel? Obviously, you want somebody to feel something, right? I don't feel like anyone creates art just to have nobody feel anything or have nobody react to it. I think art is meant to be created to form some sort of emotional reaction. It could be anger, it could be sadness, it could be happiness, or anything in between. That's for up to you to decide. But what you need to figure out is what are you trying to project and what are you trying to create with this song and how are you going to do that? So it needs to start with the songwriting process. It needs to start with at least a rough concept of what you're going to be creating. And so that can look different for everybody. But I'm going to give you an example process here that maybe you can follow and then you can tweak as you go along that maybe fits your style. Because as we know, artists have tons of different songwriting or ways to songwrite. They have a bunch of different ways that they get the job done. Some guys, they pick up their best instrument. It could be an acoustic guitar. Some guys or girls, it could be a piano. And they write the whole thing, lyrics and all, and melodies and chords. And they've got something and they're like, okay, let's head into the studio to produce this. You have other people, they start out in their DAW and they start creating sounds and they use sounds to give them that inspiration. And it kind of feeds off each other and it builds off each other. So that's totally a way you can do it as well. But I think even before going into that process, it's good to have a concept of what you're trying to convey. And so I think it's important that before you get into your DAW, spend some time. It could be on your best instrument. Let's say you play acoustic guitar, for example. You play electric guitar. Start thinking about some chord ideas, some arrangements, some lyric ideas. Maybe it's just a hook and start messing around with that. It's good to have a bit of a plan, have a bit of an idea of what you're trying to do before you get into your DAW, before you get into touching the software, loading up plugins and doing all that. I would spend some time in that songwriting, vein. If you're not good with lyrics like me, I'm horrible with lyrics. Maybe come up with melodies. Maybe it's just a song title. Maybe it's just a chorus line. It can just be a couple things. It could be the start of an idea. I have where I recorded a song from scratch. It's an 11-part series. You can view that there, where I just started out with a chord progression, and it was really a really simple chord progression and not much of a melody to begin with, but it was the start of something. And so maybe you're someone who can start out and just you love writing lyrics and you have like all the lyrics ironed out, but it's tough for you to kind of cap the rest of the production. Whatever it is, start from there and start building on that. And so for me, I'm going to give you an example of my process. Before I really get into the DAW though, I do usually have a basic chord progression and basic song title and concept figured out. I have an idea in my head that I'm starting to work on. I have an idea of what I want to all sound like in the end. And so I start with that concept. And so it can even be just a mental exercise of you figuring out what you want this song to sound like. So for me, I'll bang out a few chords on an acoustic guitar, maybe a piano. I have a song concept and idea. And then I'll go into my DAW, and for me it's Reaper, and I'll open it up and I'll just record that main sort of concept or that main little spark of an idea. So that's the first place that I would start. Come up with that concept and that spark of an idea, then go into your DAW and just record that. And sonics do not matter at this point. It doesn't matter if it sounds good, if you like the virtual instrument. Heck, it doesn't really even matter if your guitar is fully in tune. This is just all about getting ideas out. And maybe you're in a band, and in a band setting, everyone has their instruments with them, and you're just bouncing around ideas. This is where you really want to let more of your ideas out. You don't want to gatekeep too much at this point. You really just want to get in a vibe, get in a feel, and start creating. And it doesn't really matter about the sonic quality at this point. Now, sometimes something amazing happens here and you end up keeping it to the final recording. But I would say that's a little more of an exception than the rule. So you really want to not be too much focused on that. Like I said, if you're in a band setting, you guys can begin throwing around ideas and experimenting with things there. But really, you're still keeping this at a concept level. We're not getting too technical with anything quite yet, because once we start to get too much of the technical aspect into the creative aspect, the creative aspect can suffer. So you want to keep that creativity. If you're struggling to get in a vibe, if you're struggling to feel like you've got any good inspiration, the best way to get that inspiration back is put on some music or art that really inspires you. So a lot of people think, oh, I want to go make a song. I don't want to be inspired by anything. I just want it to just be me. And newsflash, we're all inspired by something, right? No one has made music. The only people who've made music are someone who's made music or heard music before. The only reason you're inspired to make music now is because you've heard great music before. So for me, I might throw on my favorite records, or I might listen to stuff that I'm really feeling right now, that I'm really kind of vibing with. And it doesn't matter. I don't need to copy that genre. I don't even need to copy, the sounds or anything like that. But it gets me in a creative mode. It gets my juices flowing. It's almost like warming up before going for a jog, right? Or for a sprint. You don't want to sprint right out of the gate. You need to kind of warm up. You need to stretch. You need to jog. It's kind of warming up your creative juices in a sense. Maybe if you're big into art or film, sometimes watching a movie or watching your favorite TV show actually gets those creative juices flowing, because it makes you feel something. You're like, oh, that was cool, or that was sad. I want to project that feeling onto my music, and it can really help with that. So take some time to do that. Take some time to get creative, get that creative idea in the DAW. Now you have the spark of something. It may take you a while to even get there, but that's okay. It takes the best songwriters a long time to even get there, to have their best ideas ironed out. But once you're there, now you want to figure out how you're going to construct this entire arrangement. How is this entire song going to come together? Because remember, you're not just recording a 15-second bit, you are recording an entire song. And so there's a couple different options here. What I think is good is to take that main instrument, and it could be a few instruments as well. Maybe you're a band and you guys play together. You could just scratch record the entire band with just a few microphones if you want. Or if it's just simple as you as a singer-songwriter, just record you and your piano. Maybe you have a sample beat in the background to help keep time. That's fine. Determine what the tempo of your song is, but start mapping out the arrangement. What's the intro going to look like? What's the verse going to look like? How long is the chorus? It's good to figure these things out kind of early in the process, because as you begin to build and add more instruments and the thing starts to get more complex, it becomes more and more difficult to make these really big sweeping changes. Like, oh, I've decided that I'm going to change the entire chorus tempo, or I'm going to change the bridge is going to be twice as long. When you've recorded everything, you've put an effort to recording guitars and instruments and pianos and drums. You don't want to make those last minute changes. You totally can, and that's fine. I'm not telling you what to do. I'm just saying it gets harder. So try to get 90% of that song arrangement figured out, the chord progression figured out. Maybe if you're a lyrics person, you've got a lot of lyrics figured out and you've got the melodies really written down. Great. You're probably farther along than I am. I push that process back way too far, maybe to a detriment. So maybe you're starting to get that figured out. Use markers in your DAW. So insert intro, verse, chorus markers. In Reaper, it's really easy. You just insert a marker with name. Every DAW has this option, by the way. And start mapping out, here's the intro, here's how long it is, here's what the chords are going to look like. You can start playing them rhythmically, how it's going to feel. And then if you want at that point, also record maybe just one scratch vocal over the top of it, if your song has vocals at all. If it's just an instrumental, great, you're already set. But if it has vocals, I would start maybe recording a scratch vocal, even if it's just the melody. Having the melody down before you record the rest of the instruments helps you create parts that don't clash, helps create parts that work with the vocal melody, don't get in the way of it, or aren't playing something dissonant with the main vocal melody, unless that's the intention, of course. So you can start there. So maybe let's say in your song, you've got it all mapped out: intro, verse one, chorus, verse two, chorus two, bridge, final chorus, outro. Let's say that's what your song is. And you've got your main instrument recorded with the chords that's going to be playing in roughly the rhythm that it's going to be played in. Now you could then add that scratch vocal on top of it. Doesn't have to be perfect, doesn't have to be perfectly in tune or in time. It's just reminding yourself, hey, this is kind of what I'm going for. And now you've got yourself a scratch track or a song skeleton. You can add a few more instruments here if you want to develop a little more of a vibe of what the song is going for. But the point is not to go too overboard here, because you're still in the creative process. You're still in that song concept process. You can have a song that's perfectly produced with all the amazing instruments and shiny production, but if it doesn't have that core concept or spark of creativeness or something that's emotive and trying to compel the listener into feeling something, then it's just going to feel soulless. So you want to develop the soul of the song first, get that down, and then you can start thinking about all the layers and all the production. It's like trying to film a film or produce a movie without a script yet. It's like, okay, you could have nice looking actors and great costumes and good lighting, but there's no script, there's no heart. Well, what is this movie trying to do? You're just filming some stuff, right? So that's a similar concept with the song. Try and figure out where the thing is going first. So now that you have this completely mapped out, you can take, there's a couple different options here for how you can build out the rest of your song. For me, I definitely like to go to percussion as a rock, hard rock, metal, even pop guy. I like to go to percussion as soon as possible, because that really is going to be the rhythmic foundation for the rest of your song. And that's what also, other than the lyrics and the emotion of the vocalist, the next thing that's really going to resonate with people is the rhythm. I mean, rhythm can really, bring people together and really can make people drawn to music, drawn to a song is just a great beat, right? I mean, people have been doing that forever. So it doesn't matter what style your track is. If there's no drums, fine. Sometimes it's just acoustic and vocal. Great. You can skip that part, right? Because that's not part of your song. But for a lot of people, they're probably going to have some form of drums. So you can either open up your best drum software, and if you're going to record live drums eventually, then that's fine. I would still maybe come in with your favorite drum software. There's also free drum plugins in that home studio toolbox that I talked about, and just build out what the drums are going to sound like even before you go to track them, to give your drummer an idea of what he might be shooting for. But at this point, if you've got your arrangement locked in, you know what the song is going to be, you can go ahead and record drums if you wanted to. You can also record drums at the end. So I know I'm giving you some options here. Sometimes it's good to have the entire song done and then record drums at the end, because you might want to make all the changes. But for a lot of you guys, you're going to be working with something like MIDI drums. So you can always go back and make changes. But I would start fleshing out that drum arrangement, finding sounds that work with your style. So maybe combining patches, adding drum samples, also found in my home studio toolbox, and filling out the arrangement that way. And so now that you've got the rhythm component, you've got the foundation of drums underneath, I would also add other percussion elements as well. You can add shakers, tambourines, whatever you feel like is going to fill out the arrangement, and do a good job of building the drum performance, building the percussion performance, the beat, whatever. Don't give the listener everything in the intro, okay? Make the song build. Make it have a climax near the end. Make it sound bigger at the end than it does in the beginning. I think it's just a good overall tip. So now that you've got your drums kind of figured out, now we're getting to bass elements. It's good to have the bass elements locked in with the drums to create a solid foundation for the rest of your track. Now, in some instances, you may want to, do that last, of course, but I think it's kind of good to build on bass at this point. So you could record bass guitar at this point. If it's just bass synths, you could go ahead and program or play your bass synth elements. But now you have that foundation of the track to go off of. Now that you're heading into the rest of the instrumentation. Let's say this is a rock song. Now we've got the bass guitar tracked. You can use various amp sims and things like that just to make sure that your bass guitar is in time and in tune. Really check the tuning, because you don't want to get to tracking the rest of your instruments, your guitars and pianos, and then realize something's off. Turns out your bass guitar was slightly out of tune the whole time. So when it comes to stringed instruments, things that aren't MIDI, make sure to really check that tuning in all parts of the song to make sure it fits. If you recorded your scratch instrument in tune to begin with, you can check your bass against that. But there's plenty of tuning plugins that you can then check to make sure that you're in tune with. Next, I might move to guitars. So I might start playing my electric guitars. The importance with something like guitars is, again, same thing with the drums, is don't give your listener everything. Don't give them 20 guitar layers at the start. Maybe start with a few guitar layers. Learn to play with some dynamics, maybe a little lighter dynamics in the beginning of the song. Get heavier in the choruses. You can add more layers as you go into chorus 2 or the bridge or something like that. But really, it's about building that song and stacking your song in a way. I have videos about production, the reverse triangle, where you're trying to build the song more and more tracks as you go along, not giving it all to your listener right in the beginning. Doesn't mean you can't have a big sounding intro. A big sounding intro is great, but it's about finding ways to make the song a journey instead of just one sort of static thing. Take the listener on a journey, makes the journey more emotional for them, helps it resonate with them better. So you may add electric guitars. This is a good place to start adding pianos. If you have strings, if you're going to be using, any other instrumentation, any other synths, I would go ahead and add that there. You're really starting to build out the song. Think strategically. What elements could I have maybe in just the bridge or in just the last chorus that can really stand out to the listener? What elements would be really good just for the verse parts? What should I cut out? And it is good to note that, especially if you're recording things in bulk, that you can record all the guitars and maybe you can record them through all the sections of the song. But later you can always go in and edit and go, I'm going to remove these guitars for the second verse, or I'm going to just leave these guitars for the final chorus. You always kind of have that option. So it's okay to kind of record a little more than you want, and then you can always take out stuff later. But if you know what you want, if you know what the sound needs to be, then go ahead and record the appropriate layers. So I would come in with all those things. And then now we're finally at the part where we need to track vocals. So if there's no vocals, you're good. You're done. You don't need to do this part. But if you do have vocals, this can be one of the most stressful parts of the recording process because the vocal is so important. That's, other than the beat, like I said, that's what people are really going to resonate with. Sorry, guitar players, your guitar, I'm a guitar player. I love it. But the vocal is king, really, when it comes to a song. When it plays on the radio or streaming service or someone's, boombox or a music player, basically what only comes through on those small speakers or someone's phone, for example, is like the beat and the vocal and maybe a little bit of another instrument. So we need to get this part down. With your vocals, I think it's really good to have all your lyrics and melodies mapped out before you go to record. I know this isn't always a possibility, but if possible, practice the parts too, so you spend less time figuring them out while you're tracking, especially if you're going into studio. But I'm assuming that you're recording this yourself. It's going to be a less frustrating process. I can tell you that from experience. If you have all this stuff figured out before you hit the record button, it's just going to bring about a better performance. You don't have to have all your lyrics 100% memorized. I sure don't. I'll have a piece of paper with them out just in case I forget. So I'm not thinking about the lyrics. But make sure you have your melodies down and your vocal arrangement down, so to speak. You should have taken care of a lot of that in the scratch track part and in the initial arrangement mapping. You should have most of that figured out. You can make some small changes, of course. But before you hit that record button, know what your vocal melody is going to be. Sure, there's weird moments where you sing something different and it sounds great. I'm totally open to those things, but have a bit of a plan before you go to record all your vocals. Another thing with like a modern vocal sound is don't be afraid of layering. There's so many layers in modern vocal tracks, doubles, triples, harmonies. I have videos on my channel about how to layer vocals. But don't be afraid, just like with your guitars or the other instruments we talked about in the choruses, add more vocal layers, doubles and triples. They really help fill out the vocal arrangement. Harmonies are great. Really, you want to think about building out the vocal arrangement as you go through the song. So maybe in the intro, you just have one vocal. Great, that's a good place to start. But by the time you get to that chorus, I'd like to see some triples and some quad tracked vocals, unless it's supposed to be a more intimate, smaller sounding song. Then, you can leave it like that. But if you want to sound big and you want to sound modern, you want the chorus to hit hard, adding more vocal tracks is going to be really important. So after we've recorded everything at this point, you really want to go through the crucial editing and tuning phase of your song. And what do I mean by that? Editing means going into the tracks and fixing timing problems. And even if you recorded them as best as possible, you're going to find a few weird timing problems. Just listen through your track critically and go, okay, that tom fill was a little fast from the drummer. Or I seem to lag on my vocal here in this part. Let's find a way to maybe nudge that. Or maybe you find that, hey, this one guitar was out of tune. Let me retract that part real quick. It's just these small little changes, but really you cannot overlook this step. This is what takes a track to a decent sounding amateur track to a pro sounding track, is really the editing and timing. There are no mistakes like that in modern tracks. I'm not saying you all need to do that. If you want your music to feel raw, if you want to feel like it's a little more organic and you want to leave some of that stuff in, great. That's perfectly fine. But for a lot of people watching my channel, they want that really, clean, crisp, upfront, modern sound, and this is just how it's done. The next thing would be vocals. Now, if you have a killer vocalist and you don't need to tune him because he's amazing, great. Or he or she is amazing, awesome. You can move on from this step. But like a lot of us and like a lot of modern recordings, some light tuning is probably something that you're going to have to do. I have a video on tuning as well on my channel if you want to learn how to do that. But just you want to fix really obvious pitch mistakes. If there's very obvious pitch mistakes, obviously on recording day, I'd rather just retrack it. But if you hear really obvious problems, go in and use whatever your pitch plugin is and just fix those. You don't need to zero in on every little millisecond of the vocal, but if this is an obvious bum note, those are things that you're going to want to fix. And depending on the level of your production, if you're really creating super polished pop music, you're really going to want to probably put on tuning just in general, even if the vocal performance is good, and fix anything that's remotely out of tune. I know people maybe aren't going to like that. I'm not the biggest fan of vocal tuning, but it's the world we live in now. And so I'm just telling you, that's kind of the process these people go through. Like I said, if you're going for organic recording, you don't want that. You want it to be bluesy, or you want things to kind of rub sonically and musically, then no problem. Leave it. I'm not telling you to do that. But a lot of people, they're trying to achieve that modern sound. This is the modern sound. So don't skip that editing process. It's very important. Vocal tuning, don't skip it. Now we're on to the mix. And I've got a million videos on how to mix on my channel. But I'm just going to give you an overview of what the process is for mixing and just sort of the mindset you should have. Really, you shouldn't be thinking about fixing your song at this point. The song should be there. All the elements should be there. You're just trying to bring out the best of each track. So start with the fundamentals: EQ, compression. Bring out what's good in the instrument, cut out what you don't like. Use compression to dynamically rein in the tracks that are a little wild. Use some top-down mixing and master bus compression to bring that track to, more of that finished sound. And then add reverb and delay and special effects to things that, you want to sound a little more spacious. So that would be kind of the next step of the mix. But most importantly is the balance of all the tracks. Now, usually if you're tracking your own stuff, you're creating a rough balance as you go. You're creating, okay, I want the drums here, I want the bass here. And a lot of the time that rough balance is pretty good because you spend a lot of time tracking, you spend a lot of time getting that rough balance. But if you're mixing something way after or you didn't like the balance, spend a lot of time getting that balance right. Spend a lot of time making sure all those tracks are sitting where they need to. That's going to be your most important part. Then EQ and compression, master bus processing, reverb and delay on things that need ambience, and then lastly, be using automation to bring things up and down during the song to create a bit of an experience. Bring a piano up during a part to make it feel more energetic. Bring a lead guitar up if it needs to be like that. If the vocal gets to a small, intimate part, bring the lead vocal down with automation. Those are just some basic mixing tips there. I've got a million videos on that on my channel, so I'm not going to cover everything mixing wise because that could go on for hours. And then when you get to the mastering stage, really mastering is a formality because you've done all the work in the production. You've done the best job on the mix. If you get to mastering, there's something wrong with the mix, go fix it in the mix. Don't do it in the master. And you have the control, so you can do that. When it comes to mastering, and I've got a bunch of videos on that, mastering for every genre, it's just about getting the most out of your track dynamically. And you can choose how loud you want it to be. But really, it's just about using some final EQ to get it to fit with other tracks, bring in a reference track. That's the quickest way to get a good master. And then just bring the level up so it'll sound good on streaming services. And that's basically mastering at that point. So that is the mindset and the process for getting a great song in your home studio. I know there's a lot more to that. That's why you have my entire channel, which is just a bunch of resources on how to do that. But that is the basic overview. That's kind of my process. My process changes every once and again. I try to broaden my steps to creating a great song, just kind of taking into account what everyone's process could be. But that's a great process for you getting amazing sounding recordings in your home studio. So like I said, like and subscribe to the channel if you enjoyed this podcast. Download the home studio toolbox, which is in the description down below. I have a bunch of other free material there when you download that guide that you'll get access to as well. So it's just a bunch of free and great resources. And leave a comment. What is your process for creating a song in the home studio? Is it super unique? Do you like following the steps I laid out? I'd like to hear your thoughts down below. Thank you for watching this podcast. I hope to see you in a future episode. And anyways, I make the music, and I'll see you guys next time.